Yeah, so she's saying we adopted a 6-year-old Native kid from Canada in like 1970, and we did not need permission from a tribe. We only needed a piece of paper from the Catholic Church. And that was pretty typical at that time. Yeah, so in Canada, there was something called the Sixties Scoop, where they were trying to scoop up Native kids from their families, even if there didn't need to be a problem with their family of origin. If they were just a Native family, that was enough. They're trying to remove those kids. Most Native kids in Canada at that time were going to residential boarding schools, and they were trying, and the Canadian government, like the United States government, didn't have capacity to build enough schools to educate all of the kids in residential boarding schools, so they subcontracted the running of a lot of the schools to churches, in spite of separations of church and state. So in both the US and Canada, this happened in Canada and in the United States. Yep. And so the Catholic Church was a big one, but Episcopal Church, Lutheran Church, there are others that were Methodist that were running schools. And so they would try to get the kids adopted out. And they thought they're doing a great favor for all these Native kids because they won't go backwards to their backward Native community and their culture and whatever. And so this will help assimilate them, place them with white families, and place them away from their communities of origin. So it's not surprising that, they didn't even, I don't know all the details, but that they would try to find a placement in a different country like the United States as opposed to Canada, because getting them away from place of origin is going, the view was that will be better for them. So it's very destructive for Native families. That's not saying anything mean about whoever's trying to seek an adoptive placement or something, they probably have a good heart and want to. Right. But the systems were engineered, to do great damage to Native families. And, honestly, that's an ongoing issue with 1 out of 3 Native kids removed from their families of origin and placed into foster care or adoptive placements. 1 out of 3? Could you imagine 1 out of 3 white kids in America not being raised by their own birth parents? There would be an uproar, And could you imagine none of those white kids being placed in a white home? And there'd be an uproar about that too, And so this is why there's like an Indian Child Welfare Act, which is designed to stipulate that tribes have a right to say what they think is best for their kids. And there's preference for placement with foster care, looking within for a relative, auntie, grandma, somebody. And if you can't find someone there, then you look for another Native family in the same community. If you can't find someone there, another Native family elsewhere, and then you look to everyone else. It had some effect, and it survived 3 US Supreme Court tests just a year and a half ago. But at the same time, you went from 99% of Native kids being placed in white homes to 79%. That was a change. Didn't completely reverse things. And a lot of tribes didn't have capacity. Sometimes people weren't letting them know when one of their kids was in a case. In Minnesota, you go to a permanent resolution within a year. If you find out at month 6, it's pretty well baked by then. Yeah. So there's still a lot of issues to address.